In the theater of politics, a single question can reveal more than an hour of testimony. It's not just about what is asked, but how it's asked, and more importantly, how it's answered. We're about to dissect a masterclass in political maneuvering and intellectual defense, a clash that exposes the deep fractures in the debate over the Supreme Court's integrity. Let's look at the key exchange that reveals everything.
Let me ask each of you this, because I consider all of you students of the U.S. Supreme Court. What do you think will be the impact on the United States Supreme Court and people's respect for it as a result of this leak about the draft opinion in the Mississippi abortion case? We'll start on this end, and then I'll let Professor Payne rest a minute.
It was already on. You know, it's an empirical question. I really couldn't say. I think that the leak, the substance of the leak, which shows that the court is going against the majority of the country, is much more damaging to the legitimacy than the leak itself.
Thank you, Professor.
Well, the leak last night is obviously outrageous and should be taken very seriously, but I have a lot of confidence in the court and the American public, and I think that the Supreme Court is going to rise above the circumstance and, as it's done for decades, apply the rule of law and issue a decision that it believes reflects the constitutional principles in the Dobbs case and all others, and trust that the Chief Justice and the court will be able to resolve and issue an honest opinion quickly.
Okay. Professor Frost?
I think the leak was unethical, but I do not think it will damage the court. And I think far more damaging to the court was the failure to fill a seat for nearly a year when a nominee by then President Obama was pending and not acted upon.
Okay. Professor, you're a professor too.
Thank you. I think the leak was seismic, devastating, and heartbreaking. It should go without saying that the Supreme Court can't fulfill its Article III responsibility if drafts of opinions are leaked and circulated for what appear to be political purposes. That said, I do think the Supreme Court is fully capable of keeping its eye on the ball and deciding this case ultimately through a final official published opinion in the way that the law and the Constitution command.
Professor Payne.
I think the leak was highly inappropriate, and it also raises the question of what are the specific rules that apply to the officials and the employees in the Supreme Court, because it's not clear about their duty of confidentiality as opposed to the duty of confidentiality for all of the other clerks across the lower courts.
Okay, thanks to you all.
So we have as people arrive and step out, we have a new list, a new order of proceeding, which is Senator Blumenthal, Senator Graham, Senator. That answer took me a little bit over it, so I apologize to my colleagues. Senator Kennedy.
That's okay, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I've enjoyed your testimony. Professor Frost, I take it that you think the recusal provisions that the United States Supreme Court uses are inadequate. I'm interested in learning more about that. Do you think they undermine, they meaning the recusal provisions at the United States Supreme Court, undermine the integrity of the court?
I do, and I think that what is unfortunate is there's some easy ways to fix and change this, which of course is in Congress's hands by adding procedures to the recusal statute.
Right. Let me ask you, what do you think undermines the integrity of the United States Supreme Court more, in your judgment? Its recusal provisions, or a member of the United States Senate going to the steps of the Supreme Court and threatening justices by name if they don't rule the way he wants on Roe v. Wade?
So I take it that this hearing is to consider a bill and to consider possible legislative reform to improving the way the court operates and protecting actually all the Article III courts. So that's going to be the focus of my testimony. And here's what this institution could do.
Yes, ma'am, but first, could you answer my question?
So your question is whether people speaking out against the court is more damaging to the court
Wasn't my
than...
question. My question is, what do you think undermines the integrity of the United States Supreme Court? The inadequacy, in your opinion, of its recusal provisions, or having a member of the United States Senate go on the steps of the United States Supreme Court in front of God and country and threaten justices by name if they do not vote the way he wants them to vote on Roe v. Wade?
So, Senator, unfortunately, over the last decade, particularly the last 5 years or so, I have seen the court come under attack from so many different sources.
Yes, ma'am. But what about that particular?
That I think that's a problem. I would certainly not support a senator criticizing the court. It's also a problem when the Senate of the United States will not confirm a nominee for over a year, leaving the court at 8 justices. And it's also a problem when Congress will not amend existing legislation to improve the process of recusal so that all of the justices can weigh in on a recusal decision and protect the integrity of that court. All of those are a problem.
Let me ask each of you this. You're all students. Well, first, I'm going to call you professor anyway. I think you're qualified to be a professor, Professor Payne. You mentioned ethical misconduct by the United States Supreme Court justices. Can you give me examples in the last 20 years of specific acts of ethical misconduct by the United States Supreme Court justices?
I can definitely send you the allegations of misconduct in the Supreme Court. The perception of misconduct has the same impact as actual misconduct.
But I'm asking for actual acts of misconduct.
Because there's no body to make the legal decision whether something is actual misconduct, I can't point to a decision that's been made. I can only...
Senator Kennedy's strategy here is a classic political tactic. He isn't seeking information, he's setting a trap. By asking Professor Frost to weigh which is worse, the court's internal rules or a senator threatening justices, he's creating a false dichotomy. The aim is to force her into a corner. If she says the threats are worse, she minimizes her own testimony about recusal reform. If she says the recusal rules are worse, she appears to excuse political threats, damaging her credibility. Notice Professor Frost's immediate reaction. She doesn't answer the question. Instead, she pivots, reminding the senator of the hearing's actual purpose, legislative reform. This is a strategic refusal to play his game. When pressed again, she masterfully sidesteps the binary trap. She concedes that a senator criticizing the court is a problem, but then immediately broadens the scope. She introduces the Senate's own actions, like blocking a nominee for nearly a year, and Congress's failure to improve recusal laws, as equally damaging problems. She effectively turns the question back on the institution her questioner belongs to. This exchange is crucial because it's not happening in a vacuum. The concept of judicial integrity is at the heart of the modern debate about the Supreme Court. Recusal is the process by which a judge steps aside from a case to avoid a conflict of interest or the appearance of bias. Professor Frost argues that the Supreme Court's lack of a formal, enforceable code of conduct, unlike lower courts, creates a legitimacy crisis. So, the senator's questioning reveals 2 key themes he wants to emphasize. First, that political attacks from the left are the real threat to the court's integrity. And second, that claims of ethical misconduct within the court are overblown. Professor Frost's response highlights a third, counter-theme, that institutional failures, by both the court and the Senate itself, are the foundational source of the crisis. This isn't just a clever debate. It's a window into the politicization of our institutions. When the process of justice is perceived as just another political battle, public trust erodes. Think of trust in the Supreme Court like the foundation of a house. The debate isn't just about whether an external storm like a politician's speech is damaging it. It's about whether cracks are already forming from within due to a weak or unclear set of rules. Without clear, binding ethical standards that apply to everyone, the court becomes vulnerable to the perception that its decisions are based on political will rather than the rule of law. Later in the hearing, Professor Payne highlights this very issue when she notes that without a formal body to determine misconduct, there can be no official finding, only allegations and damaging perceptions. So, What are the key takeaways from all of this? First, political questioning is often a performance designed to trap a witness, not to gather facts. Second, a skilled expert can dismantle such a trap by refusing the false choice and reframing the debate on their own terms. And third, the entire exchange demonstrates that the erosion of trust in the Supreme Court isn't caused by one single thing, but by a combination of external political pressure and unresolved internal institutional weaknesses. This leaves us with a critical question. Who holds the ultimate responsibility for upholding the court's integrity? The justices themselves, the politicians who appoint and criticize them, or the public that must hold them all accountable? What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this analysis helpful, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video.